you see how mad he is at the very notion that the U.S. may not consider the war in Gaza to be our war? And I think he's essentially saying that the reason Trump wanted that American out is so that no more arguments could be mounted about why the U.S. has some responsibility to care about the war in Gaza because Americans are held hostage there.
With the growing news that there's been a rift between Netanyahu and Trump, Glenn Greenwald covered what seems to be some of the most interesting responses that have been prompted by this, among them neocons like Ben Shapiro. And here Glenn weighs into that. This has to be interesting, so let's watch and let's react.
And you have seen a little bit of weakening on the part of the hardest core neocons and warmongers and Israel loyalists inside the administration, starting with Mike Waltz, but there have been others. Now, again, I don't want to oversell this at all. I think I've seen quotes and I've heard things that Trump believes that no one can attack him for not supporting Israel when we're giving billions of dollars a year to Israel. So I'm not saying like around the corner the U.S. is going to stop sending billions of dollars a year to Israel or cut them off. That's almost impossible to imagine. But any sort of reorienting of priorities where we're not placing Israel on an equal plane to U.S. interest or even above, as we've been doing, could have major positive repercussions in terms of war and other things.
Yeah, I'm with Glenn on this one. I'm cautiously optimistic that there truly is a rift between Israel and the United States, and specifically Trump and Netanyahu. I'll believe it when I see the shipments of U.S. aid and weaponry to Israel stopped. I don't think that's going to happen, but there is some reason to believe that things are a little bit better with the U.S. just brushing Israel to the side on this recent hostage negotiation and with the halt to the Yemen bombings. But let's get Glenn's take.
Now, speaking of Israel loyalists, and by the way, my saying that would be outlawed and subject to punishment under this new expanded anti-Semitism hate speech code that Trump is imposing on American colleges is an example of something called that's something viewed as anti-Semitism, to accuse any Jewish person of having greater loyalty to Israel than their own country. But speaking of Israel loyalists, Ben Shapiro of the Ben Shapiro Show was petulantly complaining and whining throughout his show that Trump is not doing enough for Israel, Trump is deprioritizing Israel. Here's just a little snippet of his rant this morning.
Clearly what Hamas is attempting to do is basically settle all outstanding business with the United States so as to then create separation between the United States and Israel in Iran negotiations. That is what is happening with the Houthis as well. It is not a coincidence that as the Houthis are basically forswearing attacks on American shipping, and the United States is saying that the United States is no longer going to worry about the Houthis, essentially, that Hamas is now trying to do the same by releasing the sole living American hostage in the Gaza Strip, trying to basically say that the United States now has no part in that conflict. Well, okay, fine. I mean, if the United States has no part in that conflict, then Israel should just go and do what they need to do. That seems to me a proper solution with regard to the Gaza Strip.
Do you see how mad he is at the very notion that the U.S. may not consider the war in Gaza to be our war?
Yeah, anytime Ben Shapiro is seething about something related to foreign policy, you know it's a good thing. And actually, one part of what Ben said there, I agree with. Israel should just go and do their own thing. Fine. Don't use the U.S. Treasury to do it. Get us out of there. Non-intervention is the best course for the U.S. That's the America First solution. Leave Israel alone, leave Palestine alone, get disengaged from that part of the world. That's the solution that we want. That's not the solution Ben wants. Ben wants to continue the $4 billion of aid to Israel every year, unlimited amounts for its genocide in Gaza, and whatever else it wants to do on the backs of the American taxpayer. That's what he wants.
And I think he's essentially saying that the reason Trump wanted that American out is so that no more arguments could be mounted about why the U.S. has some responsibility to care about the war in Gaza because Americans are held hostage there. Now, the whole thing, that whole premise is obscene from the start because this American hostage as I said, is not just some innocent American civilian who decided to go visit Israel on a tourist trip and got kidnapped by Hamas. He was in Israel because he went to Israel to fight in their army. He became a soldier in the IDF. And he was captured in uniform on active duty. And this idea that if an American citizen goes to fight for some foreign country, like an American goes to fight for Ukraine and gets captured by Russia, or an American goes to fight for Russia and gets captured by Ukraine, or Iran and gets captured by whoever, whatever foreign country they decide they want to go fight for and wear the uniform of a foreign country, it doesn't become the U.S. government's responsibility to consider that war now our war because one of our citizens went and enlisted in a foreign army and decided to fight that war. But okay, let's assume that he's an American citizen even though he's an Israeli IDF soldier too, and therefore the Trump administration should care about getting him out. I think that's reasonable. They should care, not necessarily make the war their war, but I think it's appropriate for the U.S. government to try and negotiate his release as they did. But now Ben Shapiro is saying, oh, this seems to have been done specifically because Trump wants to say that the war in Gaza is not our war. It isn't our war. It never was our war.
Amen.
Hamas has never attacked the United States, has no aspirations to attack the United States, has no capabilities to attack the United States. They're exclusively a militia of resistance designed to fight against Israeli occupation of their territory, of their land.
Glenn's exactly right here. The U.S. has no part in this in terms of national security. By subsidizing the defense of Israel, or the offense as it is now in Gaza, we subvert the purposes for which the U.S. even has a military. And I think there's something deeper beneath the surface here that Ben can't come to grips with. And that's that if Trump secures this new nuclear deal with Iran, it takes away the pretense that he and all the other neocons and fans of the U.S. war machine want to have for Iranian regime change. The fact that, oh, they're just bypassing any, previously held agreements to curtail their nuclear program, to cut their nuclear weapons program. If that's taken off the table via a deal that Trump is engineering and orchestrating with them, without Israel's involvement, as some accounts say, then that would be the ultimate slap in the face to the Israel lobby that wants more than anything regime change in Iran. It's wanted that for 3 decades, and that's what Ben is truly seething about, in my estimation.
That's what they are. That's in their charter. That's historically what they've done. That's what they do. That's their function. I can see why Israel would consider them to be in their own interest, but not the United States. Same argument about Ukraine. Ukraine is definitely in Russia's interest. It's right on the other side of their border. But how is it in the U.S. interest to fight a war to determine who governs various provinces in eastern Ukraine? Like, what difference does that make to American citizens? And of course, the same is true for the war in Gaza, but Ben Shapiro cannot abide the notion that the wars of the United States should be fought for American interests and not Israeli interests, because he sees no distinction between those two things.
Same thing was true with Trump's tariffs. Ben specifically asked for an exemption for Israel. Essentially, Israel to Ben is the 51st state, and that may be even putting it on too level of a playing field to him. He seems more loyal to Israel than the U.S. So that's just been the course with Ben Shapiro and Mark Levin and all the neocons that have always wanted increased U.S. involvement in the Middle East, in Israel, and in pursuit of Iranian regime change. As if the Iraqi regime change didn't go wrong enough. As if U.S. involvement in Afghanistan didn't go wrong enough. As if U.S. Interference in Syria didn't go wrong enough. That's what the next state is on the docket.
And also when he says, like, oh, well, fine, if the Americans want to consider Gaza only Israel's war, then the Israelis should go do what they have to do. First of all, Israel is doing what they quote unquote have to do. Ben Shapiro's like a tough guy. Like, yeah, then they're going to go in and do what they have to do. They're committing genocide. They're ethnically cleansing Gaza right out in the open. They've destroyed all civilian life in Gaza. They've killed tens of thousands of people, including 20,000 children.
Yeah, the city of Rafah, which was the biggest city in Gaza, I think it had 1.4 million people, is completely destroyed. Its infrastructure crumbled. It's a ghost town. And now Israel's talking about creating concentration zones for Palestinians to be in, one of which would be in Rafah. These are concentration camps. They're saying this openly, actually, in the media. It's even been reported by mainstream media. So this is what you're seeing in Gaza. It's mass slaughter. It's entire city blocks. It's metropolitan areas hollowed out like shells from bombs, and children pulled out of the rubble. We've all seen it. I hate to say that I've seen some of that. It's ghastly.
And there's a report in the Lancet suggesting that that count is much higher. I think clearly that's the minimum count. People are still buried under the rubble and like. But also, the Israelis can't do anything without American assistance. They could never be fighting all these wars in Lebanon and Syria and taking land and occupying the West Bank and bombing the West Bank and cleaning it out and then also fighting the war in Gaza without the U.S. lavishing it with aid and money. So if Ben Shapiro really wants to say, okay, fine, Gaza's not America's war, then Israel should do what they have to do, then argue that the U.S. should cut off Israel's aid. That why should the U.S. keep paying for these wars? Forcing the American worker to subsidize Israel. Forcing our armed service members to be deployed in the region to protect Israel. Possibly going to a war with Iran to help Israel.
Yeah, as he so often is, Glenn is completely right about this. In one way, again, I agree with what Ben said. Israel should go its own way without the U.S. bankrolling it. And Glenn's right to say that Israel gets engaged in these offensive and aggressive campaigns militarily in the pursuit of a greater Israel, in pursuit of cleaning out Gaza of civilian life because of the U.S. aid that's given to Israel. And without it, actually, Israel would still be the strongest power in the Middle East. It's the only one with extremely modern military equipment, with nuclear weapons. It would not be able to get into the aggressive campaigns it does, and instead it would focus on its own defense and security, as it isn't doing. It's basically trying to cultivate regime change operations in virtually every other state except for Israel, which really actually could probably use a regime change. The Likud party deserves to go. It's enough. Enough is enough. The U.S. should just withdraw all support from Israel, take away our military bases in the Middle East. They've never paid dividends to U.S. citizens, and stay on a course of non-intervention, the same cause that Ron Paul always called for when congressmen called to either support the Palestinians or support Israel or get involved in just these entangling alliances that have been terrible. So Glenn's totally right about Ben Shapiro here. He is seething with rage because he sees the potential for Iranian regime change slip away, as Netanyahu does too. And I don't completely buy this idea that there's a true rift between Netanyahu and Trump. We'll see where the money leads. Always follow the money, right? And I suspect it will continue to flow. AIPAC and the Israel lobby are still too strong, but it still is uplifting to see Trump kind of sidestep or bypass Netanyahu to some extent on the Yemen bombing campaign and the release of this recent hostage. But I do want to hear what you guys think. Is Glenn Greenwald right about this? And is Ben Shapiro just angry that he sees the possibility of Iranian regime change slip away? Let me know in the comments below. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Take it easy, guys. Peace out. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.